Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Florida. And today our question comes to us from Vivian. It's an older question that I recently ran across, and it's a follow-up question to earlier vlogs that we had done here on the subject of psychic vampirism. And Vivian's question is this: if you are the parent of a hyperactive child, is it appropriate to use energetic techniques to take the excess energy from your child so that your child may be calm and can avoid being in dangerous situations if that is the case? And the second part of that question is, when is the appropriate age to begin asking permission to do such a thing? And I'd like to start answering this question with a few words on the subject of free will. You'll very often hear people say that you must never ever interfere with a person's free will. And all things being equal, this is absolutely true. It's completely inappropriate, all things being equal, to interfere with other people's free will. However, when things are not equal, it is another question. And there are certainly situations where interfering with free will is not only appropriate, but needful to do. For example, if a person's free will is to rob, rape, or murder, it's completely appropriate to interfere with that free will. It's not an appropriate free will for someone to be indulging in. We have a social contract that we live by, and we all know that there are certain things we should not do. And robbing, raping, and murdering are among them. And particularly if you are the target of this action, using magic to interfere with that person's free will to rob, rape, or murder you is completely appropriate, and is not, in my opinion, any sort of violation of anything. Now, when the person is causing harm to themselves, it's a somewhat trickier question, but not with children. If a child is in harm's way, no matter that it's their free will to be there, you must interfere with that. That is your responsibility as an adult, and even more as a parent. And to give a couple of examples, if your child's free will is to put their hand on the hot stove and burn themselves, generally speaking, you should not permit that free will to take place. You should interfere with that free will. It not only is appropriate, it's your job as a parent. If your child's free will is to run out into a busy street and play in traffic, you should certainly interfere with that free will. Now, an argument could be made that if you do not interfere with that free will, Darwinism will take care of the situation for you. But it's literally your job as a parent to prevent your child from Darwining out. And if you don't do that, you have failed as a parent. So yes, it is appropriate on occasion to interfere with free will. In some cases, it's a trickier question than others, but in the examples I've given, there really is no particular complexity to the question. Now, in the case of the hyperactive child who has too much energy, I would say that whether you choose to try to diminish that energy or not depends on the situation. Is it leading them into a harmful situation? Is it causing them a problem? In that case, yes, you should, as a parent, take the necessary steps to alleviate the problem. And we had this discussion in Chancellor's Chat maybe a year ago, and the Archpriestess Alyssa was in the chat room, and she made the suggestion that your first course of action should not be to remove the excess energy, but rather to ground it. And I completely agree. The first and most appropriate step in that situation is to ground the child's energy. And as soon as possible, teach the child to ground their own energy. However, it is important to remember that it's not always so easy to ground energy, and sometimes it's more effective to remove the excess energy. And I do not think that it's at all inappropriate if you're preventing a harmful situation. And I would say that it would be in fact the correct thing to do. Now, when is the appropriate point where you must start asking permission? Well, I would say that's very individual. And it is one of those things that can, in fact, perhaps be a tricky question. But if you have taught your child to ground the energy, then you really won't need to ask permission, because you generally won't need to do anything. They will know what to do themselves. And if you find that it is necessary to do more, then from an early point, I would say it's appropriate to ask permission. But if they're harming themselves in some way, or headed for a harmful situation, and they're still young children, it is your job to prevent that. And saying, oh, it was their free will is really not an excuse if they get hurt. And I would say you must do your job as a parent. And when is the appropriate time to start asking permission? When the child is mature enough to make that decision, which is very individual. Some are mature very early, others not. If your child is 30, you certainly should not be regulating their energy for them. But if we're talking about young children, yes, I think it's completely appropriate. But again, you start by simply grounding the energy and only move on to siphoning off excess energy if for some reason it cannot be grounded effectively at that time. And there are a lot of different situations where excess energy could cause a harmful situation. And again, as a parent, it's your job to prevent harmful situations. So those would be my thoughts on the matter. I hope you find them helpful, and until next time, may you blessed be. Please join me for our Correllian Peace Prayer. I pray for peace. I pray for love. I pray for stability. I pray for the nation where I live. I pray for the world.